Welcome to the Evolution Partners podcast, where I talk with the world's leading thinkers, planners and doers who are helping to build great companies in their own way. We learn how the work they're doing is creating an impact and get to know a little bit more about them and what makes them tick. This episode is brought to you by Evolution Partners, where we help leaders to confidently build enduring great companies using our proven, structured, strategic planning process that ensures you build and execute the right plan. Check us out at evolutionpartners.com.au. Also, you can check out our books, Made to Thrive, outlining how to be a great CEO, as well as Onboarded, which is about making your new hires more effective faster. Fleur Hazelwood is a thinker and doer. She's a leadership expert and founder of the Blueberry Institute. With over 20 years corporate leadership experience, she's known for building positive performance cultures that deliver both employee well-being and commercial results. Partners with CEOs, HR and leaders to create healthy, resilient and productive workplaces. She's trained and mentored over 3,000 people in positive leadership, mental health mastery and future-fit resilience building. Fleur has lectured in organisational culture and well-being at the University of Melbourne and has been a CEO of multiple companies. She has a Masters of Coaching Psychology, Bachelor of Commerce, and she is the author of 2 books, Resilience Recipes and Leading Wellbeing, which was voted Book of the Year 2024 at the Australian Business Book Awards. Fleur, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for hosting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's my pleasure. Fleur, on top of that quite impressive resume, just maybe tell us a bit more about yourself to kick things off. A bit about your journey maybe.
I guess as a starting point, when we talk about journeys, I was one of those kids that got dragged around. I did 10 different schools across 4 different countries. My average length of time at a school was like 6 months. I think my longest length of time at one school was 2 years. And so when we're talking about journey in those formative years, I guess reading the room and resilient skills or building resilient skills was something that I learned before I even realised that they were actually a skill set or a thing. So when it came to, I guess, moving into my post growing up and schooling career, I took some of those perspectives and most importantly, I guess, the importance of taking the time to understand my stakeholders, to truly understand what success looks like and what needs to be delivered as the foundation or the basis of, how I grew myself and how I grew my career. And I guess from that perspective, achievement and overachieving became one of my drivers, particularly when you're looking at things like, fitting in and trying to prove, you're worthy of a seat at the table or what it is that, you're being expected to contribute.
Yeah, wow. I always hear about the people who go to so many schools and it must be a hell of a journey. So with that, you've then gone to uni, I'm guessing, gotten into the corporate kind of world. Just give us a bit of a quick overview maybe of your career from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did a commerce degree as my first I guess formal education post school. I'm a lifelong learner and a studier. So yes, I have a long list of qualifications, but a lot of that's been around making sure that I'm at the forefront and the cutting edge of what I'm teaching and also what I'm practicing in terms of best practice. But the reality was when I finished uni, I knew what I didn't want to do. So I didn't want to be an accountant and I didn't want to be a banker, but I didn't actually know what I did want to do. So my first job was actually a graduate trainee program with PepsiCo, which involved doing a little bit of everything for a 12-month rotation. And my first month rotation was actually getting a truck driving license and delivering chips around the inner suburbs of Melbourne. And let me tell you, it was a character building experience. And if I could have gotten any other job at the time, I would have taken it. So there's a bit of grit and tenacity there. So when you talk about my career development journey, I think grit and tenacity are probably a couple of good descriptors for that.
Good. Love it. So you're delivering chips, and then you go through I mean, how do you go from delivering chips to CEO? I mean, that's an interesting journey in itself.
I guess there are a couple of drivers there. One is I've always taken great pride in being able to figure things out for myself. So there's a decent streak of independence that comes through. And I also value multiple perspectives and ways of looking at things. And a lot of what I learned from my own, I guess, the people that managed me on the way through, was a lot of it was very much about task management, and very little of it was actually about people management and people contribution, and very little of what I was being managed to was around what else can you do, or what else can you contribute, or along the lines of how can we make this better or do this better, and very much around fill in these boxes and tick these squares kind of thing. And so one of my I guess drivers from a early career perspective was very much around wanting to work for people that were, I guess, limiting in terms of beliefs and ideas and creativity and innovation, but also not wanting to work for people that didn't actually value me and care about me as a person. So those early steps around going from those technical expert roles into manager and leaders was very much around, I want the opportunity to do this better, and I know that if I have the opportunity to do this better, I can also deliver better results. So my trajectory to management and my first leadership roles was actually pretty young, and a lot of it was because I didn't like where I was. I'd like to say that at that point in time I had that much broader philosophical care for other people, but it was simply, I need to get away from this awful manager and this awful way of working, and I want more control over how I can create an environment that's going to bring out the best in me and others. So I actually got to a point, I think I achieved my first sales director role, executive team role at the age of, I think it was the age of 28. And as part of that, I gained a team of 150 and went through my first global, regional, local restructure. And obviously from a sales perspective, a lot of what you're doing has immediate results and impact. So it's not like something that's a little bit more strategic around, we'll know in 6 months' time whether this decision to focus on this area of growth versus that area of growth is going to come through. Your results are immediate because you're being judged on a daily basis on how many bottles of tomato sauce you've sold, or how many packets of this particular brand of chips you've sold. And at the end of each week and month, there's a direct reporting line as to whether you are delivering an acceptable profit or not. So I was pretty early on very conscious of the need to be continually checking and balancing my people decisions with the sales and the profit and the commercial results that were coming through. And so I think my very early leadership experience in sales was also what helped me with that razor sharp link, I guess, between people, initiatives, sales, what's delivered, and then if something's not working, being able to say, hey, this isn't working, being upfront about it and being quick about readdressing it.
Awesome. There's having looked at your resume, your CV, there's a particular line in there that I want to hone in on. And I'm going to read from your CV. It says, successfully navigated the global financial crisis commercially, delivering a strong profit while retaining all staff. Now, I think there might be a little bit more to that sentence than it first seems. Tell us a bit more about that event, what happened and how it impacted you, if you will.
That sentence and that event lasted for close to 2 years. So yes, just a little bit more behind that than what it would apply. And I think one of the interesting things about the global financial crisis was it was the first time, I think, since around the early 1990s that Australia had actually experienced something as drastic and dramatic that in a very short period of time across a number of industries are threatened actually not only our ability to thrive but also our ability to survive. And so a lot of businesses were tanking and going bust. There wasn't a lot of government support because this is something that our government wasn't used to and wasn't expecting that it would need to support people from. And so the knee-jerk reactions that many of us were faced with. So the company that I was managing rolled up to a board that managed a bunch of companies. Luckily, I was one of the smallest in the group, so I was pretty much left to my own devices other than a couple of directives. But interestingly enough, one of the directives that I was given was that I needed to reduce my fixed costs, i.e. headcount, by 30% within a 3-month period of time. And I looked at this, so I had a manufacturing and distribution as well as an overseas purchasing business that sold into retail across the board in Australia. And many of the workers that we had been with this company their whole entire working career. We were looking at an average length of our workforce of around between 25 and 30 years worth of service. And I also knew that if these people were made redundant, many of them were no English and low skilled and would not pick up work. So from a moral perspective, I looked at it and went, this is not the right thing. This is just not the right thing to be doing to people who have actually contributed to making this such a successful and profitable company. But also from a business lens and a strategic lens, I also looked at this and went, well, I actually can't just take 30% of people out of the business and it not actually have an impact on our ability to grow and recover. Because 30% of people simplistically was not, just a reduction in needless headcount. It actually meant that I wouldn't be able to staff 50% of our production lines.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at some of these short-term, long-term needs to balance short-term profit with long-term growth in a sustainable business, it actually didn't make business sense. So I took that challenge and went, okay, how can I get my balance sheet to an acceptable level in a way that means that we will still be poised for recovery and we'll be able to take advantage of things when the market swings back, because the markets always swing back. We just don't know how long it takes for them to swing back.
Yeah.
While also doing my best to do the right thing by people. And one of my fundamental philosophies is if we do as leaders the right thing by people, then people will do the right thing by us. So I did quite a bit of research and I got quite a lot of advice, and I decided that I was going to ask our staff if they would voluntarily agree to a 20% reduction in shifts and working hours for a temporary period of time. I was also advised not to do this because if one single person said, no, I don't want to do it, then it would have triggered a legal round of redundancies, which I couldn't afford to pay with a 30-year tenure average across my staff on the books.
There's always that, right?
So we're talking a high risk move.
Yeah.
So I worked all through it and I went, you know what, this high risk move actually isn't as high a risk as we think it is if we are open, transparent, and we actually share why we're doing it and that this is for the good of everyone. And so quite simply, I went to the factory. So I stood up on a table. You can't do this anymore. We didn't have workplace health and safety laws back in those days. I stood up on top of a table in the middle of the canteen, in the middle of a shift break, and I put my plea to the group that said, hey, I've worked out a way while we don't know what's going in the market where everyone can have some work and everyone can have some job security, but we're all going to have to contribute as well, and we're all not going to have the same kind of income that we're used to doing. Anyway, the interesting thing is I got to the end of it and I'm standing on this table in front of 120 people and I'm shaking like a leaf. And then there's this dead silence. And then someone puts their hand up and goes, Fleur, we actually don't understand a word of what you're saying. I think it was from the main speaker of the Indian-speaking group of people that we had in our factory. But if you think that this is the right thing to do, we trust you and we trust that you care about us. And so if you need us to sign this piece of paper, we will sign this piece of paper. And so I literally had a queue of people that came up to me and said, Fleur, we trust you, and if we need you to sign this paper, we will sign this paper. And so we actually navigated the global financial crisis together. And I never made any promises that I couldn't keep. I said, let's trial this for 3 months. I don't know how long this is going to take. But what I do know is every week I'll come down and I'll talk to you about how many orders we've got coming in. You'll be able to see how many shifts we've got. So it's not like I'm going to be able to hide it from you. And I will also tell you everything that I'm doing to try and get us more work. And the interesting thing about that is in the industry we were in and within the group of companies that we were in, we recovered faster than anyone else, because one of the things I also committed to them was I would go around and bang on every retailer's door and work out, how much, work. And
well, you had the latent
sales
capacity, right? You had the latent capacity when it turned, or to make it turn, and then move quick to respond.
To be able to do things. And so some of the things that we did were completely off strategy, purely to cover fixed costs for a period of time. Now, if I didn't have the workforce to do that, and if they weren't willing to work with me to figure out a solution, we would not have been able to do that. And so one of the things I'm most proud of is we came out of the GFC faster than anyone else in our industry. I didn't lose one single person in terms of headcount. And while we were the small business in terms of revenue across a group of 10 companies, we actually posted the highest profit return and increased our market share during that period of time. So when I'm talking about the fact that wellbeing at work works and that wellbeing isn't just good for people, it's actually good for business, I've got my own lived experience case study of having done that.
And that's so important. Well, it's so important to me and maybe our listeners, because there are so many people who talk about the human side of business without any practical tips or, more importantly, deep connection to return on investment. And I've spent a lot of time looking at and thinking about and writing about and reading about the return on investment. But really, it goes back to you standing on that table and having so it was scary, but having the trust from the team to be able to make the changes. I mean, like, that didn't happen in that moment. That was all the little things that you did in the preceding time that gave you that license, I guess, that mandate to be able to try something different. But what about the effect on you? Because like, that in itself is a great story. We've loved the fact that you got a commerce background, because you get it. But what about you, right? Because, okay, so you've come out of the crisis, outperforming the group, some fantastic story, saved jobs, helped lots of people. That's good. But here's poor old Fleur out in the background who's dealing with a lot of these things. And I'm going to frame this kind of question about what about poor old Fleur with, you have said before that you once wore the workaholic badge, as many of us have. Workaholic, sleep when you're dead, we've got to get things done, all of that hustle mindset. So tell us about what happened to Fleur through all of this, and you're wearing the workaholic badge at that time or prior, and then how you kind of managed and dealt with that.
So I came out of the global financial crisis with a company in really good shape, an extremely healthy balance sheet, record profit levels versus my comparison set, a team of people and a company of people that had job security and were able to go home every night and sleep well at night. And I completely and utterly slaughtered myself in the process. So I pushed and I pushed and I pushed to the point where my body literally shut down. So when we talk about burnout, and I'm extremely rigorous around the definitions of burnout, what it is and what it isn't. So burnout is not just exhaustion, there are a whole bunch of other things as well, but I also came out of the GFC with clinical burnout. So my body shut down completely from a physical perspective, not just a mental health perspective, and I got to the end of the GFC and I literally had nothing left in the tank. And so for me, shifting gears wasn't a nice to have, it was a necessary. And as you said, I have a commerce degree. I did the master's in coaching psychology after I came out of the global financial crisis and went, I've proven that doing the right thing by people is good for business. Now I actually need to go and figure out how I can do the right thing by the business, the right thing by people, and also the right thing by myself. So very much where I sit now, where my passion comes from, is actually having to develop for myself, because it took me almost 2 years to get my physical and my mental health back to a place of wellness. That's how badly I crashed myself at the expense of everything else going on. So part of it was about recovery and learning and relearning these strategies, I guess, that I didn't have in my toolkit. But the other part of it as well, so there's that recovery bit, and this is where I find a lot of our conversations in Australia still are, particularly when we're talking about the need to get better at supporting people with mental health. But what I care most about is the preventative stuff up front. So what are the everyday things that we need to be doing for ourselves, for our people and our business to ensure that we are achieving healthy as well as high performance. And the healthy bit is what makes us sustainable and happy and contributing and thriving and all of the metrics that count for us when it comes to us personally as people. But also, if we keep operating at the levels of mental health and burnout that we're currently seeing in our workforces, we're also going to burn our businesses out as well. So we know that in any one year at the moment, 20% of people have a diagnosable mental illness. And it's not to say that people can't still do their jobs with mental illness. We absolutely can, and I've got the lived experience, that attests to that. But we can't keep doing it and we're not bringing our best. And when we've got, and our current stats at the moment are between 68 and 75% of people over the last 12 months actually reporting the official burnout signs or experiencing actual burnout, what we're looking at as leaders is we're going to start tanking our businesses, not just our people, if we don't fundamentally get out of, I guess, these, old-fashioned sort of like manufacturing mindsets around time clocks, and time card punching. And it's actually quite sad. We talk about time card punching and we think of the Model T Ford, kind of models. But if you look at what we're doing now in terms of sort of like people's access cards to offices and what people are doing around this, working from home and flexibility, we're back in punch card land where people are starting to equate, output and business success with whether people are actually turning up to the office or not. The reality is it's not how people are turning up, it's actually how people are and what they're doing and how they're contributing. And that's a completely different paradigm when it actually comes to building a high-performing, healthy, sustainable team and business.
So how do you define healthy high performance? What's your definition? Because it feels like it's been an ore for so long. And I literally yesterday was talking to a young person that I know who's looking at two separate jobs. One is in a multinational with a very strong Wellbeing program. That's all I need to say. The other, which is a startup where there's going to be a lot of work and a lot of time. I want to come back to the question, how do you define healthy high performance?
So healthy high performance is very much around ensuring that you and your people have the energy, the engagement, the skill set that is going to enable you to cope with the ups and downs, to recognise when things need to be peeled back and paced, and is creating downtimes in order for people to reflect and recover and move on. So when you put those healthy practices, or that healthy part with high performance, what you've got is, instead of sort of like peak periods of good work to hit deadlines, you've got people that are continuing to raise the bar and up the ante and are consistently delivering what the business needs day in, day out. One of the challenges that we've got, and one of the reasons why I deliberately put healthy into high performance as opposed to talking about his well-being and here's performance as two separate pillars. And you would understand this obviously coming from that business strategy perspective. At the moment, what I'm seeing in most people's business strategies is like, here are the business enablers, here are the things that we're going to focus on, and by the way, here's our wellbeing initiative. So when we're looking at wellbeing as a program or initiative or a cost centre, not surprisingly, it doesn't work. Wellbeing needs to be the way that we do things around here. So it's our conversations, it's things like respect, it's things like clarity of roles, it's things like feedback, it's things like providing people the flexibility that they need in order to do those practices that they need to bring their best to work. Sorry, just lost one of my headphones. Need to bring to work. And interestingly enough, when you're talking about a startup, that actually doesn't cost a lot of money. We're talking about conversational skills and commitments and practices in a development plan. A lot of the big wellbeing programs that we see, so things that are provided which do have an upfront cost, like offering yoga classes or providing regular lunches for people to socialise and those kinds of things. Those are quite important from a cultural perspective and an optics perspective, but you can have all of those things and a toxic manager or leader who is not actually managing their staff in a way that's going to bring the best out of them, and it doesn't matter how much money you spend on those wellbeing initiatives, you're going to lose that person, or you're going to lose engagement, and you're going to see their performance suffer, and you're also going to see their well-being suffer. So for me, that healthy part of high performance are the healthy hygiene factors of well-being that are the everyday things.
Everyday things. I mean, the first things you were talking about there was clarity of roles and understanding what it means. I mean, these are, what I love about that is these are not necessarily things that the average person on the street might equate with workplace wellness. But it gives you a sense of, this is what I'm accountable for. This is what I'm responsible for. There is the ability to not push myself too far. Like, I know, like, it is an achievable role that I'm undertaking. But I want to double click on something else that you said there, and I'm going to quote something else that you've said before. Businesses receive an average return on investment of $2.30 for every $1 they invest in effective workplace mental health strategies, making investment in mental health a win-win situation for employees and employers. Unscripted question, but any reaction to that? Because I think it's important. It's a really important part of the dialogue that it's not data that is made up. Yeah, maybe if you could just talk about the return on investment that you've experienced and seen as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Interestingly, that stat is probably understating the return on investment at the moment. I think that stat may have come out of my resilience recipe book, which is now 3 or 4 years old. It's nice to know that we're actually finally getting some decent business numbers behind the business case for wellbeing. And we're seeing some pretty rigorous studies now coming through that is actually showing our return on investment for wellbeing in a work perspective is sort of like between $3 and $7. But let's face it, a nebulous between $3 and $7, what does that actually mean to a leader and a business owner? Not much. And one of the things that I did, and this was about 10 years ago, because I was really concerned about the lack of tangible business outcomes and results that we could put numbers around when it came to putting in place some of these wellbeing initiatives and actually training our leaders and managers in better resilience, wellbeing and mental health capability skills for themselves and their teams. So I did a leader and whole of workplace 18-month wellbeing program with a construction company. People always say to me, well, that's, great, Fleur, that works well for people in suits in offices, but what about the real world? The nice thing about this study is we had office, we had warehouse, we had manufacturing, and we had everybody in between. The whole company was a part of this. And so one of the things that I can share is coming out of the end of this program, we had some really tangible stats. So we reduced significant safety incidents by 50%. We reduced absenteeism and unplanned leave by close to 30%. We actually reduced turnover by about 10%. So we had 10% less people, resigning and moving to other companies in a 12 in a 12-month period. Then when it came to specific workplace wellbeing measures, so things that we care about, like how engaged are people, and I know engaged sounds a bit academic-y, but the reality is one of the things that we know is engagement is the best measure that we've got for, are people willing to stay, back to work on a project late at night, and are they willing to put some of their own discretionary effort and time into this? So our engagement scores also increased 15%. So if we think about just on a simplest level, if our employees were willing to put in an extra 10 to 15% of their own time, what would that mean in terms of our top line? So a lot of those other measures I talked about were bottom line ones. So things like reducing safety, turnover, absenteeism, all of those things cost us as businesses, but we were also tracking well on those metrics that affect the top line. So even things like turnover, if you've got 10% less people leaving, it means you've still got, or you've got 10% more of that investment in knowledge and experience and people who know how to do things and do things well, staying and being engaged in doing that and showing others how to do that.
Yeah, wow. That's what I love about the book and more broadly your work is like it connects to real things, right? And it's no secret that we talk predominantly about the mid-market where we need things that are simple, practical and actionable. So I love that you've got those kind of quotes. So in that example, can you perhaps share with us, and maybe you can't, like what are a couple of really simple, practical changes that you made to give a better definition of wellness, perhaps? Because wellness, people might think, yeah, we provided an EAC, like an employee counselling service, or we provided a mental health app for their phones. But that's not necessarily what you're talking about. Can you give us maybe a couple of examples of the types of things that you were doing there?
Yeah, absolutely. So at a starting point, one of the most straightforward but also the most important place to start is actually around educating your key leaders and managers on what is wellbeing at work, what are their roles and responsibilities, what do we mean by psychological safety, what does that actually look like in a management context. And I can see, or I can virtually see or feel everyone giving me an eye roll going, oh, here we go, we're in that compliance, tick a checklist land. But the reality is if we do it well and we actually share with our leaders and managers the business case for actually how it is going to help them and improve team cohesion and improve our ability to get work done and improve our ability to do a good job, then all of a sudden we're going to actually have a leadership group that says, hey, talk to me about this and how can this work? So the very first thing that we need to start doing is actually talk about what wellbeing is. And one of the challenges with wellbeing is there is no universally agreed definition of what it is. So there's a whole bunch of components that make up what it is in a workplace context, but each of us has got our own opinions and perspectives and experiences on what it is. So we need to actually start by having a conversation with our leaders, our management team, whatever is most appropriate for our business, around not just what it is, but what it actually is going to mean at our business, and give our leaders and managers some training in what that looks like and actually start to embed it. The second part to it, quite simply, is actually improving our team meeting conversations and our one-on-one conversations. So one of the first things that we can do in our one-on-one meetings, usually I tend to find we turn up with like a work in progress or a task list and go, okay, where are you at on everything this week? And that's what most of our weekly one-on-ones look like. Where we can start and make a difference like straight away, quite simply, that doesn't cost anything or create any more time, is we start with, how are you going?
Why is that different?
How are you going is going to get to the bottom of what do they feel confident about, what are they struggling with, and like what kind of energy and engagement are they bringing this week?
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And the really helpful thing is if you know how someone is, you're going to know best then how to tailor and support what it is they need from you. But you've also got the opportunity to do any course corrections where there are clearly areas that you think are priorities that they're not going to be able to get to.
Yeah, nice.
Before these things leave the gate or end up being overdue.
Great example of it, something that's practical. In the book, Leading Wellbeing, you emphasise the importance of small daily habits. Could you share a couple of the lesser known, maybe micro practices that people can implement immediately, maybe, especially for the people who are straight away thinking, look, I don't have the time for this?
Absolutely. So, I learned this the hard way myself. So when I took on that sales director role, I was also advised by our managing director at the time that he didn't care what I did other than I needed to report back to him and prove to him that I had had a weekly one-on-one with every single one of my direct reports. And at that particular point in time, pre-restructure, I had 27 direct reports.
It's your week.
And I said to him, I said, where on earth am I going to get 27 hours from and still deliver the numbers? Because you can't tell me that you're not going to be kicking my butt at the end of the week if I come and say to you, oh, by the way, I've had 27 one-on-ones, but I actually haven't delivered my numbers because I've been too busy having conversations with people. And one of the things that I learned by having both of those non-negotiables sitting there and being made accountable for it was to make those conversations work and to make those conversations powerful. And so in terms of those small tips, when we're talking about making wellbeing stick and wellbeing stick in the context of having the energy, the capability, the capacity and the commitment to delivering our priorities, actually spending time thinking about that hour that we spend with a person each week and go, how can we make this the most impactful, hour for both me and them that's going to set both of us up to have a successful week.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about those little everyday tips, actually taking the time to think about what's the intention for this meeting? How am I going to make the most out of it? Does it actually need to be an hour? Do I know where the red flags are? Do I actually know what the green flags are? Do I know what is going to motivate this person to put in the discretionary effort? And so by simply changing the structure of our conversations, our daily conversations, we can get 20-30% better effectiveness and efficiency out of our time than just rocking up and going, oh, show me what's on your list for this week.
I think it's okay to have a 1 hour meeting that finishes in 45 minutes. And it doesn't mean that we need to fill up everything all the time. If you can get it done quicker, then it's kind of a win-win.
Absolutely.
I want to just ask you a quick question about enabling versus tolerating unhelpful behaviours. How do you define those and why are they so important?
It's interesting because when we talk about tolerating, and I think this is a really interesting one. Often when we are tolerating behaviours, it's because we don't have the energy or the courage, or we're not sure whether we're going to experience some kind of backlash or negative repercussions back on us personally if we bring something up. So we might choose not to say anything or to sit there quietly or to brush something under the carpet or go, look, this isn't, an A priority for me, it's a B one, so I'll just let this one go. But one of the things that I think is really important for us to understand is when we tolerate behaviours, we're actually making a choice. And we're making a choice that says this is okay. And I think many of us don't understand that our passive behaviour actually is an active choice. And so when we continue to leave behaviours that aren't appropriate, we don't address them. When we see people that are struggling, but we don't actually lean in and have a conversation to say up front, hey, what's going on and what do we need to solve for this together, we're actually enabling those behaviours to continue. We enable those behaviours by tolerating them. What happens is we are insidiously undermining our culture. We're undermining the respect that our team has for us. We're undermining people's ability to get their work done, and we're actually undermining their engagement and enthusiasm, not only in doing the work, but actually in staying here and contributing to us as a business.
Yeah, I mean, saying that we've used before is culture, core values maybe, but moreover, culture is really personified by what are you prepared to walk past and what are you not prepared to walk past. So love it. So what does it mean to be energy positive or in an energy deficit? Kind of switching gears around a little bit, but it's really something that was interesting that I saw through your work. What's important, I think, is figuring out if we are personally in an energy positive or energy deficit. So any tips around that?
Yes, one of the things that I am very, very mindful of, and I'm consciously monitoring for myself on an everyday basis. Not surprising, given I've come from that complete and utter cleaning out of energy in that clinical burnout, place that I spoke to you about. And one of the things that we know are things like well-being, energy, resilience, are all skills as well as, I guess, buffers and reserves that we can all draw on to either move forward or do our best work or get through adversity in a good shape or bounce back from tough times. I prefer to say bounce forward. Well, if we sort of like bouncing backwards, it's not particularly motivating for anyone. So yeah. There actually are skills, particularly around managing our energy and our resilient skills, that can enable us to not just recover from adversity, but sort of like learn on the fly and get faster, further forward faster. But one of the things that's really important to understand is that more that we draw down on our energy, so there's energy deficits, so things like excessive hours at work for a prolonged period of time, high caring demands. So many of us, particularly in this like leadership, business owner roles at the moment, will be in this like beautiful sandwich generation terminology of, children to look after and then aging parents that also need care. So we can't underestimate the level of energy and time that goes into our caring responsibilities, either outside of work. Things like caring responsibilities, long hours, chronic stress, those kinds of things are continuously drawing down from our energy reservoirs. I like to think of it a little bit as like our, like the fuel tank or the temperature gauge in our car. So the more that we are drawing down on our energy without replacing it, the more likely we are to be heading towards a deficit. Yeah. The more robust we are in our everyday practices and making sure that we are topping up our energy every day. So it's healthy nutrition. I don't need to tell anyone when here. I think most of us know the basics. We're just not necessarily doing it. So it's prioritising the healthy nutrition, the consistent sleep, the consistent movement and exercise, those kinds of things. If we're not investing those on those on a daily basis, we are not going to have the same kind of reserves or capacity to do as much as we would like to do. Yeah. And so we need to be mindful of which way we're going in terms of our energy.
So maybe you're going to say, do that stuff, but the question I have next is, how can entrepreneurs and leaders improve their resilience?
So how we can improve our resilience is actually by investing in learning some of those core skills. So one of those myths that I like to bust is that you're either resilient or not. You either have resilience or you don't. It's actually a load of crap. We've all got a level of resilience. Some of us are born with more than others as our starting point. But for me, we can all learn a set of resilience skills. And the skills for me fall into 3 areas. So one's around coping skills. So how do we actually cope with pressure and learn to healthily manage stress? There's another set around when times are tough and we've got challenges and we've got a whole bunch of things coming at us that are difficult. And I'd hazard a guess, a lot of us are in that place right now with the economic and financial, issues that we're seeing at the moment. How do we navigate those in a healthy way without taking them on board and tanking our health in the process? Third one is around how do we actually create those sustainable energy practices, which means we are going to be in good enough shape to get up day in, day out and be okay, or not only okay, but embrace what the day might bring us. So this is something that I've learned the hard way, and my book Resilience Recipes comes very much from me putting myself back together again after I burnt myself out. And I wanted to know, what are the evidence-based things that work, but not the difficult, fluffy, argy-bargy ones, but what do they look like and how can we put them in place in I call it minimum viable dose. What's the minimum viable dose that I can do for my morning routine, which means I can knock over all of these things each day and then know that when I turn up to work, I'm in the best shape possible and it doesn't matter what happens from there on in.
Awesome. Love it. So the book that I'm working on at the moment, it has a working title, Bigger Isn't Better, Better is Better. And so it's about building a better business. So for you, Fleur, how would you describe a better business?
For me, a better business is one where we've got a good mix between proactivity and reactivity. Where I'm seeing a lot of businesses struggle at the moment is we're in this reactive paradigm. We're very much at the mercy of what's being thrown at us. So being very clear about what our priorities are, and not just what we're saying yes to, but being really clear around what we need to say no to make the yeses work.
Yeah, love it. Go on.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, so for me, healthy performance as an individual, healthy high performance as a team, and a healthy high performing business is all around boundaries. What do we care about?
Yeah.
How do we make what we care about happen? And how do we protect that at all costs?
Oh my God, that's good. I love it. Thank you so much. What is a book that you might recommend for our audience of listeners?
So the book that I've read, so this is a recent book. I've got a ton of books that I love, not surprisingly, given that I'm an author. However, a book that I read literally just in the last month, which I highly recommend, which is very much in that place of how do we ensure that we are in peak energy or peak performance for ourselves. And this one is very much from that sort of like physiological neuroscience perspective. It's written by a doctor, but it's extremely practical and everyday. So I find it is a great demystifier. And it's called Good Energy, and it's by Dr. Casey Means. And interestingly enough, you're laughing, I'm guessing you've read this as well then.
I've read it.
It's called Feel Incredible, Prevent Disease and Live Longer. And there's a lot of fabulous, small, actionable things that we can all incorporate into our own life first. So of course, while we've been talking about leading wellbeing today, leading wellbeing actually starts with living wellbeing and modelling wellbeing for everyone else. So my book recommendation is for each of you personally.
I've read it and loved it. At the beginning, I thought, what the hell kind of rabbit hole have I just fallen into? Like, next thing they're going to be talking about 9/11 or something. And then suddenly it was like, oh, hang on, that makes sense and that makes sense. And by the end of it, there's very strict things that you need to do to positively impact metabolic health. I think it's a bit, it's very much in the medicine 3 space, like the current area of medicine. So if you've got any interest to that, I agree and strongly recommend it and love that book. How can people learn more about you and your business?
Very straightforward. Come check out what we have at blueberryinstitute.com, or hit me up on LinkedIn, or for more personal tips. I guess the personal tips are on Instagram, and the business tips and strategies and what we do are on LinkedIn. But you are very welcome to message me directly, and let's set up a call and talk about what your needs are.
Awesome. What haven't we covered off today that you wanted to cover off?
Oh my goodness, I think we've had a fabulous chat actually, wide ranging from personal to teams to business. I guess I'd like to leave our conversations with a couple of my favourite mantras. So the first one for me is that people that are well do well. But if you look at the way that we're working, we're doing a lot of doing, but not a lot of well. And we've now got close to 20 years worth of research that shows us that if we actually put the happiness and the well-being first, then all of our doing measures will improve. So things like productivity, innovation, our ability to problem solve, our ability to develop better relationships at work, all increase by anywhere between 9 and 30%. So my challenge to our listeners is to start thinking about well-being as your enabler of performance as opposed to your reward for results.
That's great. What a great way to end. Fleur, what a great chat today. I can see now why you won the Business Book of the Year. Just the practicality, insights. The book is great. Again, it's Leading Wellbeing by Fleur Hazelwood. We'll put the link in the show notes. But yeah, I can see it's really practical, actionable. I just love your approach. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with our audience today. It's been a delight.
And thank you for the opportunity to put the wellbeing back into work.
That's good. All right. Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did. If you'd be kind enough to leave a review for the podcast, that'd be really helpful to other like-minded entrepreneurs and then we can grow our community. If you want to find out more about our guests, head over to evolutionpartners.com.au/podcast, where you can find show notes and other additional reading. Hope to see you back next week. Until then, keep thriving.